I wasn't supposed to notice her that way. Not her. Not the woman who used to sit at our kitchen table when I was too young to understand why she laughed softer around my mother than she did with anyone else. But that night I did. It started with a phone call. My mom's friend, Elena, said her sink had burst and she couldn't get the water to stop. My mom was out of town, and I lived close enough, so she asked me instead. When I stepped into her house, the smell of chamomile tea hit me first, warm, steady, almost stubborn against the sharp bite of damp wood and running water. She was barefoot, standing in the middle of the kitchen with a towel pressed against the cabinet like she thought she could hold back the flood by sheer will. "Sorry," she said, brushing hair out of her face. "I didn't know who else to call." I shrugged, crouched by the pipe, trying to focus on the wrench in my hand instead of the curve of her shoulder in that loose sweater. She stood close, too close, the kind of distance that made the air heavy. "You've grown," she said suddenly. I almost dropped the wrench. "That obvious?" Her laugh was soft, a little embarrassed. "I remember when you were all knees and questions. Now you look like—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. I didn't ask what she meant. I couldn't. My chest was too tight. The leak slowed, then stopped, and I leaned back on my heels. "There. Should hold until a plumber takes a real look." Elena handed me a glass of water, her fingers brushing mine just long enough to feel intentional. "Always knew you'd be good with your hands." The glass shook slightly in my grip, though my voice stayed level. "Guess I learned something." She tilted her head, studying me the way you study a photograph that doesn't match the memory. Her silence pressed harder than any words. I filled it without thinking. "You seem different tonight," I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe you're just seeing me differently." We stood in that too-quiet kitchen, the only sound the tick of the wall clock. I kept trying to sip the water, but my throat was dry. She broke the silence first. "Your mother always said you'd grow into yourself. I just didn't realize it would happen so quickly." I looked at her then, not as my mom's friend, not as the woman who'd known me since I was a kid, but as she was, barefoot, tired, radiant in a way that felt dangerous to look at too long. Something shifted. A door that shouldn't open had cracked. I set the glass down before it slipped from my hand. "Elena!" Her phone buzzed on the counter. Neither of us moved to answer it. Instead, she stepped closer, her voice low, almost staring. "You've become the man I always knew you'd be." Her words burned through me. My chest, my skin, my every thought lit up like I'd stepped into fire. Before I could say anything back, her hand grazed mine again, slower this time, deliberate. And then she looked at me, really looked, like she was waiting for me to decide what came next. I should have left right then. Wiped my hands, thanked her for the water, gone home and pretended nothing happened. But I didn't. Elena leaned against the counter, arms folded like she was trying to hold something in. The towel she'd used earlier was damp on the floor, and the steady drip from the pipe had gone silent, yet the tension in the room only grew louder. "You shouldn't," I started, though I wasn't sure what I meant. She raised an eyebrow. "Shouldn't what?" The question caught me, stripped bare. I stared at the floor, at the faint water stains spreading like veins across the tile. "Talk to me like that." Her laugh was quiet, but not mocking. "You're not a boy anymore." That was the problem. She knew it, and now so did I. My chest tightened. I noticed her sleeve had slipped down, exposing a pale curve of her shoulder, and I hated myself for noticing. Hated that I couldn't stop. She tugged it back into place like she'd caught me staring. The silence after that was too heavy. I filled it clumsily. "You and Daniel, you're not together anymore, right?" Her expression flickered, raw for half a second. She didn't look at me when she answered. "We haven't been for months." She busied herself with the kettle, though the tea inside had long gone cold. "Sometimes it feels like I've been carrying that ending on my back for years." Her voice trembled on the last word, barely audible, and it pierced through me deeper than anything she'd said before. I wanted to tell her I'd seen it in her eyes all along, the loneliness, the way her smile was just a practiced curve. Instead, I bit down on the words, tasting only regret. "You deserve better," I managed. She finally turned, searching my face. Her gaze lingered too long, as if daring me to finish what I wasn't saying. The clock ticked. My pulse echoed in my ears. I caught myself watching the way her fingers tapped against the counter, restless. Small, fragile movements that told me more than her words did. And for the first time, I realized she was just as conflicted as I was. "You really should go," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. My feet didn't move. "Do you want me to?" The question hung between us like smoke. She closed her eyes briefly, as though weighing something too heavy. When they opened again, there was no retreat in them, only a quiet ache. "Stay a little longer," she said. Her hand brushed my arm this time, not an accident, not something she could pretend away. I froze, caught between the danger of what we were stepping into and the magnetic pull I couldn't fight. And before I could respond, before I could breathe, she whispered, "Please." I told myself I'd just sit for a few minutes, maybe have some tea, then leave. That's what I told myself. But then she poured water into 2 cups, sliding one toward me, her hand trembling just enough for me to notice. It wasn't the tremble of weakness. It was the kind that came from restraint, from holding something back too tightly. We sat at her small kitchen table. The only light came from the lamp above us, a soft gold glow that turned everything quiet and unreal. I found myself watching her lips as she blew across her cup, then quickly looked away. My pulse hammered against the silence. "You've always been kind," she said suddenly. "Even when you were young, you noticed things people didn't want noticed." Her words landed heavier than I expected. "Like what?" I asked. Her eyes didn't flinch. "Like loneliness. Like mine." Something cracked in me then. I gripped the handle of the mug tighter, trying to anchor myself, but the steam blurred my vision. "Elena!" I stopped, because saying her name like that felt too bare. Too dangerous. Her hand brushed mine on the table, light, hesitant, but real. I didn't move. I couldn't. Just as the air between us thickened to the point of breaking, her phone rang on the counter. Loud, shrill, ordinary, and yet it made both of us jump. She stood quickly, fumbling with it, her back to me. I watched her shoulders rise and fall as she glanced at the screen, then silenced the call without answering. "Who was it?" I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated. "Daniel," she said finally, her ex's name tasting bitter in the air. The silence after that was worse than the ringing had been. I wanted to pull back, to remind myself this was wrong, off limits. But instead I noticed how she stayed facing away, how tightly she held the phone like she was afraid of what answering it might pull her back into. "You don't owe him anything," I said, softer than I meant to. She turned, her eyes glassy, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Don't make it sound so easy." The words clung to me, wrapped around my chest. I wanted to reach for her, to take away that look, but I stopped, my fingers curling into my palm. She sat back down, closer this time, her knee brushing mine under the table. Neither of us moved away. "Why are you still here?" she whispered, almost accusing, almost pleading. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Because I don't want to leave." Her lips parted as if to answer, but no sound came out. The clock ticked. The faint hum of the fridge filled the silence. We were both waiting for the other to make the wrong move. Or the right one. And when her hand reached again, this time resting fully on mine, I stopped pretending I didn't want it. Her hand was warm on mine. Too warm, too steady, like it had always belonged there. I should have pulled away. I should have. But instead, I let the silence wrap around us, let it press down until my chest ached. "Elena!" I said, my voice rougher than I meant. She didn't answer, not at first. She just studied me, her thumb tracing a small circle against the back of my hand. A gesture so casual it shouldn't have felt like fire. Finally, she spoke. Do you have any idea what you're doing to me right now? The words landed between us like a dropped glass, sharp and impossible to ignore. My throat closed up. I tried again. I think I do. Because you're doing the same thing to me. Her eyes closed, just for a second, and when they opened again, they looked older, tired, vulnerable, stripped of all the practiced poise she wore around my mother. You don't understand, she whispered. I've made mistakes. I don't want you to be one of them. My chest tightened. Then stop looking at me like that. Her breath caught, audible, fragile. She leaned back slightly as though I'd hit her with the truth. You're too young to carry this. You should be out there, falling in love with someone who doesn't complicate your life. But I don't want someone else. I said before I could stop myself. The words came out too raw, too fast. I bit down on the end of the sentence, but it was already hanging in the air, unfinished, undeniable. Her lips trembled, though she didn't move them. The kettle clicked behind us, announcing the water had cooled, but neither of us reached for it. For a moment the kitchen blurred, the damp floor, the ticking clock, the phone still silent on the counter. All I could see was her, the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her breathing didn't match her calm expression. Elena, I said again, softer now. Tell me to go, and I'll go. She shook her head slowly. That's the problem. I can't. The air thickened. My hand turned under hers, our fingers lacing before I could second-guess the choice. She didn't stop me. Her face was inches from mine now, her breath catching every time she almost leaned forward and stopped herself. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out reason. Then she whispered, so faint I almost missed it. If I let this happen, there's no undoing it. I swallowed hard. My voice came out like a promise. I know. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, charged, alive. Her gaze locked on mine, unflinching, daring, waiting. And in that moment, with her hand tightening around mine, it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see if we'd finally crossed the line neither of us could uncross. The silence between us had weight, a gravity of its own. My hand was still tangled in hers when she suddenly pulled back, her chair scraping the tile. Her face was pale, her breath uneven. We can't, she whispered. I leaned forward, heart pounding. Then tell me why. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her eyes darted toward the counter, toward her phone lying face down like it was hiding something. Elena, I pressed. What aren't you telling me? Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone, thumb hesitating over the screen before she finally turned it around. The last message glowed faintly, unanswered. We need to talk. About him. I frowned. About who? She swallowed hard. You. My blood ran cold. What? Her voice cracked. Daniel knows. He's been watching. Or guessing. He said the way you look at me, it isn't normal. He said he's going to tell your mother if I don't stop this. The room tilted. 1,000 thoughts slammed into me at once. Betrayal, exposure, the sheer risk of what we were doing. But beneath it all was a single, stubborn truth. I didn't want to stop. Elena, listen to me, no. She cut in, her voice sharp now, almost panicked. You don't understand. I've lived my whole life trying not to be the woman who ruins people. And here I am, standing at the edge of doing it again. Her confession hit harder than Daniel's threat. I saw it then, the regret etched into her, the way her shoulders sagged like she'd been carrying the weight of past mistakes too long. I wanted to reach for her, to erase that look, but she stepped back. You need to go before this gets worse. Something inside me refused. No. I'm not letting him decide this for us. Her eyes widened, shimmering with something between fear and longing. And what if I decide? I froze, words catching in my throat. She stared at me, waiting for me to flinch, waiting for me to back down. But I didn't. I stepped closer, my voice low, urgent. Then say it. Say you don't want me here, and I'll walk out that door. Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. The silence stretched until it burned. Finally, she whispered, broken but true, I don't know what I want. The clock ticked once, twice. Her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the counter, but neither of us moved to answer. I could feel it in the air, the shift. The ground beneath us had cracked, and nothing about this night would go back to how it was before. Her eyes met mine, wide and unsteady, and for the first time she didn't try to hide the pull between us. Tell me, I said, my voice shaking. If Daniel's right, if my mother finds out, do you regret this already? Her silence was the answer I couldn't bear. Her silence felt louder than any answer. It pressed into me, into the cracks of my chest, until I couldn't breathe. Elena, I said, barely holding my voice steady. If this is already a regret, then stop me now. She shook her head, a sharp movement, but her eyes betrayed her. You think it's that simple? Her voice was hoarse, almost breaking. I've spent years trying to do the right thing, and it's left me lonely. Empty. I can't afford another mistake. Something inside me snapped. Then why call me tonight? Her lips trembled, and for a moment she had no answer. Her hands gripped the edge of the table as if she needed it to stand. Because I knew you'd come, she admitted, voice breaking into raw honesty. Because I wanted you here. The confession hit me like a current. All the nights I told myself I was imagining it, all the stolen glances and half-finished thoughts, they weren't just mine. I stepped closer, careful but determined, until only inches separated us. Then stop pretending we don't both feel this. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes, fighting herself. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do, I whispered. I'm asking you not to run. Her breath hitched. The wall she'd built around herself cracked. And what if I hurt you? I shook my head. Then at least it'll mean it was real. That broke her. Her shoulders sagged, her hands lifted just slightly, like she wanted to push me away but couldn't bring herself to touch me at all. The tears she'd been holding back slipped free. I reached for her hand, not forcing, just offering. She let me take it, her fingers trembling against mine, but she didn't pull away this time. Elena, I said, my voice shaking. I don't care if the world thinks it's wrong. I don't care if Daniel talks, or if my mom looks at me differently. I care about you. Her tears turned into a shaky laugh, small and disbelieving. You're too young to carry words like that. Maybe, I admitted. But they're still true. We stood there, tangled between fear and inevitability, until finally she leaned forward, just enough that her forehead brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was more intimate than anything else could have been. For a moment, everything stilled. The weight, the danger, the ache, it all collapsed into that fragile closeness. She whispered, so soft I almost didn't hear. Promise me one thing. Anything. If we do this, we don't run from it. I closed my eyes, pressing my hand tighter around hers. I promise. The kettle clicked again in the background, but neither of us moved. We stayed in that loaded silence, breathing the same air, knowing the line between us was already gone. The promise lingered in the air between us, fragile and terrifying. Elena's forehead rested against mine, our hands still locked together, as if letting go would undo everything we had just said. When she finally pulled back, it wasn't to retreat, it was to really look at me, steady and unflinching. You don't realize how much this changes, she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. I do. And I don't care. For the first time that night, she smiled, not the polite curve she wore at family dinners, but something unguarded, almost young. It broke my chest open. The phone buzzed again on the counter, Daniel's name flashing across the screen, but neither of us moved for it. She let out a small breath, shaking her head. He doesn't get to decide my life anymore. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't just me choosing her. She was choosing me, too. We didn't rush into a kiss, or fall into something reckless. Instead, we sat back down at that little kitchen table, both of us still trembling, and just stayed. Her hand never left mine. The storm inside us had finally settled into something quieter, something real. The words came slowly, but they came. She told me about the years she'd spent trying to keep people happy, even at the cost of her own. About Daniel, about the regrets she carried like stones in her pockets. I told her about the nights I couldn't stop thinking of her, about how wrong it felt and how impossible it was to turn away. We weren't perfect, and we weren't pretending to be. But there, in the warm hush of her kitchen, I realized love didn't need to be perfect to be true. It only needed to be chosen. When I finally stood to leave, the clock had crept past midnight. I hesitated at the door, half expecting her to stop me, half fearing she wouldn't. She did. Her hand brushed my arm, tender and certain. "Come back tomorrow," she said softly. "Not as my friend's son. Not as someone who happened to fix my sink. Come back as you." I couldn't speak. I just nodded, the weight in my chest lifting for the first time in years. Walking home that night, I felt the danger still there, the risk, the whispers, the fallout. But under it all, there was something stronger, the quiet certainty that I'd been seen, truly seen, by the one person I never expected. And maybe that was worth everything. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? Thought Balloon, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?